If all you want to do is, have a paycheck and, work 9 to 5 and that's it, yeah, then fine. Anyone could choose that.
Sure.
But if you want to choose to be outstanding or exceptional, you need to get involved in the industry and really make your mark, contribute. Welcome to Behind the Screens, conversations with background screening pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Behind the Screens today. I am Robert Capel. I'm your guest host for today's episode, and it is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to today's background screening pro, the Godfather of background screening, the Sultan of Screen, and the gentleman we consider the founder and, of course, our first leader of our Background Screening Association, Lester Les Rosen. Les, thanks for being on the show today, and thank you for having me as a guest host. I appreciate it.
Well, Bob, thank you. And the $20 I paid you to give me that nice introduction, obviously I got my money's worth, so I appreciate that. I appreciate
No problem.
it. Thank you very much.
You can buy a nice beer. So let's get right into it. So why are you considered the Godfather of background screening? Help us understand.
Well, I don't consider myself that. I mean, people say that, and that's very nice of them. But I think it probably goes to my background screening was my retirement career. It's kind of like my third career, and I got into it, kind of early, and did a lot of writing, and did a lot of speaking. I spoke at SHRM every year for years at 1, 2, or all 3 conferences or major conferences. And I wrote the first book on background screening, The Safe Hiring Manual, and the keynote speaker at Steve Brownstein's conferences. Steve Brownstein really, started the ball rolling by starting conferences on his own dime at Long Beach and then Tampa. And then I got roped into being on the steering committee to start an association. And then they made me the chair. And then as a chair, I just stepped in and did whatever I needed to do, and essentially the acting director, and did everything needed to get us to a point where we actually had an elected board and a meeting and an association, and then the thing just took off, which I'm so proud of. All the great people have done so much great work. So it's been a fun ride.
So let's step back to that first meeting. So the first conference, you said it was in California. There was education going on there and some other things. So tell me how you got together with a group of people and made a decision to say, hey, we need a background screening association.
So it really kind of goes back to Steve Brownstein, and Phil Snedell was working with them in Long Beach, and Kurt Schwal was there. For the first time I met Kurt. I think that's where the first time I met Mike Sankey, and there was a little bit of discussion there. And then Steve's meetings moved to a couple of different places in the Tampa area. And it was during one of those meetings that enough people had met over a period of 3-4 years and relationships had started that people felt that, wow, we should have an association. Things are happening. And I had just gotten through a process in California where California had passed a bill, AB 655, that totally changed background checks, but zero input from anybody who actually knew about background screening. So I called up Stan, who was the chief of staff of that particular assembly person, and introduced myself. And he said, well, come here, let's rewrite it. So I basically rewrote the California law. And I just thought it was crazy that here I am, just a one background screener writing the California law, and there's no association, or there should be, a lot of us, and I was making decisions and drafting, and we were getting stuff done. And so that just led me to think, God, we really need to have a group. So at one of the meetings in Tampa, it was Sandy Burns, who's no longer with us, wonderful lady from Arizona, who, saw the enthusiasm. And Steve Brownstein was saying, guys, why don't you form something? What's wrong with you people? And Sandy kind of, put some people together. Most of them are not in the industry anymore, other than Kurt Schwab. And put together a committee and then invited me to join. I initially said, no, I'm busy. I got stuff to do. And they said, you're joining, you're a member. And then the next thing, now you're chairman.
Right. There you go.
It's kind of went from there. So
You're appointed.
You're appointed. It's the last one to, put my hand down or whatever. So, and then Sandy actually arranged a meeting in Arizona where a group of us went, and we had with us a person with years of experience in how to start an association. Because no one appointed us. We weren't voted on. No one,
Right.
We weren't official. I mean, we were just
Right.
volunteers. We just said, we're the screening committee, and no one really said no. And so we had a gentleman who advised us on the pitfalls and the steps and the punch list that you need and how to, bring everyone together and build trust and a feeling of mutuality and mutual benefit. And the steering committee got to work. Another group met, I think, in Dallas and did some really good work on ethics and membership that was adopted. And we had another meeting in Washington. And it just kind of got more and more cemented, and the punch list got a little clearer. And I, as chair of the steering committee, I had to make a lot of decisions. I couldn't always have the steering committee for every decision. I would just make decisions because we just had to get going. And the best decision was I hired IMI, still with us, and Stevie took a chance on us because we didn't exist as an association. We were a proposed association, and again, Mike Sankey knew Stevie and IMI and said, Les, that's what you should go with. I said, I think I did whatever Mike told me to do. So I said, okay, yeah, well, all right. And I signed the contract. And I had no authority. I mean, I just signed it and they accepted it as chair of the steering committee. And I think they were taking a flyer on us. And we went ahead and I, said, let's do the membership. Let's set a date. Let's get going. Let's have an election. And we put it out there to the whole community. If you want to be on the board, send us your name. And IMI put together the election and people got nominated. I put my name in. I had no idea if I'd be, elected to the board or not, but whatever. And they elected me. And then the board met for the first time as an elected board. And by this time we had gone through the legal ABCs. And so we were a legal registered entity. And at the first board meeting, I remember walking in a little late as always, and they had left the chair open for me and said, oh, I guess you really want me to be chair? Okay. And I didn't really want to be chair of the steering committee and the first chair. So I said, well, let's have co-chairs. I didn't want it to think like any one person was, too much involved. And David Hine, a great guy, became the co-chair for that first time. We did co-chairs for a few years, and Art Cohen saw the wisdom of individual chairs. And I think when you came through, you were a co-chair with Barry Nadell.
Correct.
And Jason Morris and Mary Paquette were the co-chair-elects. And what I'm really proud of is the fact that I was able to step back and the board coalesced and started doing things, and things started to happen. And now, fast forward, some 20 plus years, and it's the difference between a Model T and a Jaguar. I mean, now we have an executive director with Melissa Sorensen. We have professional staff. We have Michelle LeBlanc. We have people that are, at that point, we were just all doing it as volunteers. And I kept saying, at some point, we're going to have professional staff. We can't do this all on volunteers. And that finally happened, and it took off. And by that time, I was past chair, and I was off the board. And it was really all the other, really talented people, that, yourself and everyone else who was not only board members and chairs, but committee chairs. I mean, the people who did the government relations committee, work they did was just, I don't know how they did it. It was just an ungodly amount of work tracking what the 50 states were doing, and they were on top of it. Yeah. The people who did that and the people who did accreditation, it was just incredible, the talent that we had, and membership and finance and education and professional standards and the supplier standards and all the different things. So, yeah, I'm very happy that I had a role to play at the beginning, but the success of the organization is really a reflection of the talent and enthusiasm and dedication of just so many people who just rolled up their sleeves and spent hours and hours for the sake of the industry as a whole. So it's been just a really wonderful thing to see this thing go from just me and a few other people thinking, well, I wonder if maybe we'll join, to this really sophisticated organization we have today.
Yeah. And that was back, let's see, our first conference, Scottsdale, 2003, I believe. That's when we first organized and did our first elections and all that good stuff. So that's really when it started. So what about some of the first lobbying efforts? And I remember, I think there was a small group that went to DC for our first take at lobbying and talking to legislators and staff members and things like that. And I just remember, I wasn't on that trip, but in the early days, it's amazing how legislative staff don't understand the background screening process. They just think, oh, well, it's the FBI database. That's, you access the database and that's it. I mean, that's a background check. And educating Congress was so important.
Yeah, we had a small delegation. I just had an interview with Kurt Schwall, and we went through all those details. That'll come out very shortly, but Kurt was head of government relations initially and helped set it up along with Bob Belair with AGG, and got us appointments with the folks at the Federal Trade Commission, which was huge. It was the first time we'd ever talked to Federal Trade. And they were, at the time, it's ancient history now, they were writing these opinion letters that were, like almost like the word from a high coming down on Mount Sinai. Everyone had to pay attention to that, and not anymore. And Dan Shoemaker and I think Teresa, I'm trying to remember who else was there. The list is around here somewhere. So at Barry Nadell, she'll love heart. So I don't want to leave anyone out. And we were able to see a couple of the congressman who was in charge of the FACT Act. And for you FCRA nerds, you might call 2003, 2004, there was the FACT Act that really changed things. And we had no involvement. I mean, it all happened without background screeners being involved in one iota. And we had to put a stop to that. And we made our first contacts with the Federal Trade Commission, and we talked to Sherm and Aziz and other folks, and started the process of getting our name out there as the voice of the screening industry. And since then, it's just, it's turned into this wonderful, fly-in day, and we have professionals now who work with legislation. But in those days, it was just overwhelming. In every state, every year, there was just all sorts of laws were proposed. I mean, most of them didn't go anywhere, but you had to be aware.
Sure.
So it's just been, so interesting to see how all this evolved.
Sure. So let's back up a little bit. Let's kind of talk about your career path a little bit. And you don't get out of school and say, oh, geez, I want to be a background screener. So, and I know you went to UCLA, graduated in 73, I believe.
Yep.
And just so you know, the majority of the background screeners were not even born in 1973. So a very new industry, as we know.
Well, thank you, Bob. That makes me feel really young and invigorated. I appreciate that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no problem. And then you went on to the University of California, Davis. You graduated with your law degree in 76. You became a deputy district attorney, right?
Well, before that, I went to a high-powered L.A. law firm where I specialized in legal problems of rich people, basically, and did that for about 2.5 years, and decided, well, that's not a lot of fun, and I really want to be in front of a jury, and so I went to the DA's office in Riverside, California, and became a deputy DA, and that was a blast. My first year, I did 33 jury trials. And then, I was there for 4 years. I did a lot of jury trials. And those were the days when you did a lot of jury trials. And some days you'd show up to the office and they say, well, and there was a robbery going out in Division 4, and the deputy who's supposed to handle it, is tied up somewhere else. So here, you try it. So I'd hand me the file and go over to the court and, just hope to God witnesses have been subpoenaed and the police officer's not on vacation and no one threw away the evidence, and that the judge wouldn't start testimony until the next day because I didn't have any witnesses I talked to or an opening statement. And in fact, one time, and people find this hard to believe, I actually had a handoff murder case. I mean, literally, got to the office that day, 9 or 10. They said, there's a murder case going out. Here, Les, you try it. You don't have anything on encounter today. I said, no. And I walked over and I did a murder case. And,
wow.
It was just, you just did it. I mean, you didn't think twice about it. And I mean, you have to hustle to make sure that you get your witnesses. And you have to interview your witnesses at night or at lunch. And you hope you can free up an investigator, or you hope the evidence is around somewhere or so. And you just go, you put on the case. And justice was done. So it turned out to be a good result. But those were the fun days when we just go and just try cases left and right.
Yeah, the DA's office. You just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
Every day's different. So after the DA's office, you worked for another law firm. You were a criminal attorney. So now you're on the defense side, correct? You were there for maybe 10, 11 years, correct?
Yeah. So my first wife got a job offer, was also a lawyer. She got a job offer in San Francisco. And I said, well, that sounds fun. I'll move to San Francisco. I've been in LA all my life. So I was, Dodger Blue, UCLA. And I'd gone to law school in Davis, so I was familiar with the Bay Area. So I moved to the Bay Area and started a criminal defense practice.
So what was the most interesting case that you had to try there?
Well, man, there was just, lots
The
and
most
lots
bizarre case, let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, you do lots of different cases. So I did a triple murder case that occurred in the 1970s where they just caught the person and the FBI said that my client was a mafia hitman with 37 kills, but who knows?
Wow.
And so so I did a lot of jury trials, but that was like an 8 or 9 month jury trial. I did a death penalty case where my client was not the shooter. It was her boyfriend was the shooter, but she was accused of being the ringleader. And it charges a death case, and so which means we would have a death qualified jury, which means a jury that would be willing, under the right circumstances, to impose death. They weren't philosophically opposed to a death penalty. So when you do a death penalty case as a defense attorney, you already have a death qualified jury that you're dealing with. So and they actually offered her 2 counts of second degree murder. And I won't go into the facts of the case. It was horrible.
That's
These
fine.
2 innocent people were shot, and it was just a grisly, horrible case. They offered her 2 counts second degree murder. So in the death penalty world, that's a huge victory because you got death off the table, but still for life in prison essentially. And I told my client, I said, well, here's the deal. I'll do whatever you want, but if you want me to try the case, I think I can get you off. I just don't think they understand the facts correctly. But it's sensitive. You can't tell your client to risk death because you think you're going to win. So it's a client's decision, but the client decided that to let me try the case. And we came back, I think 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, which was 5 years, and she got credit for time served. And even that got thrown out because I made some legal arguments that the judge turned down. So, that's an interesting case. I had a number of cases that were complex cases that were 6, 8, 9 months where you're in trial 4 days a week or every afternoon. I actually once had a trial within a trial. I was in trial in San Francisco on a murder or something. And there was a 2-week hiatus. And then I went back to Marin County and I had some cases. And I said, well, I can't. I have a case in San Francisco. And they said, well, but that's been put over for 2 weeks. You can try this one. So I tried that case and went back to San Francisco and finished the San Francisco case. So it was, just an interesting time. And of course, as a defense lawyer, you spend nights and weekends in every jail and every jurisdiction you're involved in because you have to interview your clients and get cases ready. So, I spent a lot of time behind bars during that period of time. So that was interesting as well.
And you did that through till 1996, I believe, correct? And then you started ESR. So what made you decide to hang up your hat as an attorney, a defense attorney, and say, hey, I want to open up a background screening firm? What made you think of doing that?
Well, it was an indirect journey. Originally, to go back a long time, I actually always wanted to be a doctor, but then I couldn't stand the sight of blood. And then, of course, as a DA, I spent a lot of time at autopsies.
Right.
Because when there's a murder, you have to see the autopsy and cause of death. And as a defense attorney, you don't go to autopsies, you can see autopsy photos. I say, I'm tired of autopsies. And I was having hearing issues, and I just kind of had enough of it. And I actually didn't decide to start a screening firm right away. What I decided to do was retire and never to work another day in my life. And so I closed out my practice. My last case was like an 8 or 9 month federal jury trial with 10,000 hours of wiretaps. And I got my client was not guilty, and, which is not something you see often in federal court. I said, I'm going to go out on a win. So I said, I'm done. Rented out my house. I was single at the time, and I said, I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. All right. I had planned to be a permanent expatriate and, get a job as a diving instructor someplace and live in paradise or move around Europe. And I had not intended to ever work again. And I was, financially able, not to do it in style, but to do it, easily enough. And that was it. I hung it up. And what I didn't account for was the fact that before I left, I met my now wife, and I, about a year into my travels, I said, I don't know, I miss her. I'm going to go home and see her. And so I came home, and we got together, and sort of the short story is, still didn't want to work. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I wasn't going to work. And she said, basically the old joke, you're married for better or for worse, but not for lunch on Monday through Friday. Get the heck out of my house. Do something, whatever you do.
Right. Do something.
Just leave me alone. Go somewhere. Do something. And I had, in the back of my mind, I had an inkling about background checks because as a defense attorney, I at one time represented a very nice lady when she wasn't robbing people. And she had just gotten out of prison for a 10-year prison sentence for armed robbery with great bodily injury. And she and her friend, who also had a 10-year prison sentence, went to a staffing firm. And their first assignment was to be a caretaker for like an 85-year-old woman. And unfortunately, what they did is instead of taking care of her, they took care of her possessions, locked her up, left her. She survived. And, it was just, and then, I was able to help her as best I could. And during that, I was thinking, why would a staffing company send to a little old lady's house, an 85-year-old vulnerable lady, two caregivers who both just got out of prison for armed robbery? There's got to be some way to, something about that didn't seem right. And
Right.
that was my first inclination. Like, God, maybe I didn't even know if I used the word background checks. I just sort of had this ephemeral idea that, maybe you should check people out before they go on certain jobs. And then later, my investigator, who I used most of my cases, did background checks on the side. And of course, those were the old days when you did things by mail and they took weeks and lots of money. But so I had that idea. So when I came back, I said, well, maybe I'll start a background check company. I didn't know. I mean, how hard could that be? Well, it a lot harder than I thought, obviously. And researched it. I think I started writing about it, started learning everything there was. As a lawyer, that's the sort of thing, I had cases with 10,000 pages of discovery. So, attacking a subject matter I knew nothing about and trying to master it was something, you just kind of do as a trial attorney. And I opened up ESR having really no idea what I was doing, and so I reinvented the wheel. It turns out we all kind of reinvented the wheel in pretty much the same way. I mean,
Right.
You get criminal records, you get this, you get that, and you all end up doing more or less the same. And we had files and all that kind of stuff, and just slowly began to build the business and was having a great time. And I think at the time I may have been the only lawyer or one of the few lawyers in it. So I did what lawyers do. I started writing articles. And that's how I got, in touch with Steve Brownstein, became his keynote speaker, and started, developed a website with lots and lots of resources in it, and it just kind of developed from there. So I kind of got involved in background screening accidentally as a retirement career. I was doing some commercial real estate. I've always done commercial real estate most of my life, but that was not a full-time thing. That was managing a portfolio. So I did the background screening. I just started from nothing, and sort of a kitchen table, and it's similar to your story. I've talked. So
Yeah.
I thought it sounded interesting, and it involved a little bit of law, and it was, in the FCRA, and it was just kind of I said, well, this looks fun. This could be fun to do. And my CPA at the time said, Les, you don't know anything about business. You're a lawyer. You don't know the first thing about building teams and management or any of that stuff. I'll learn. Right.
So that was my next question. So chief cook, bottle washer, you did everything. What was the favorite thing that you liked to do in the early days? So say your first year in business. What did you do? What was your passion?
I liked the most was compliance. I mean, I was just fascinated by the FCRA and state rules and making sure that everything was done in a compliant fashion. And then setting up systems, I was really interesting. And then learning from scratch, marketing and sales. And, that's something I've never really had to do before. So, and accounting and all the other things that are vital and essential. Mm-hmm. But it was actually sitting down and just trying to figure out, okay, here's the laws in all 50 states. I put together my own 50-state guide. And, I took a stab at writing a universal form, which turns out you probably can't do. And just did a ton of writing and memos for in-house how to do things. And so that part I thought was always, the compliance part was real interesting. And that was the days before, major law firms had whole sections of lawyers, dedicated to background screening and the FCRA and reporting and accuracy and so on and so forth. Those are the days where we were all kind of on our own. And then when I was stuck, I would call Larry Henry, and Larry would use, unless you're wrong again. All right. And then we kind of figured it out.
Sure. And of course, you had your hand in creating technology. You're an innovator as well. So, you must have a passion or a drive for technology and innovation.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, we used Microsoft Access, and so I took classes in programming, and Access was at the time, it was a Microsoft product. It was a
Mhm.
kind of an easy database product. I mean, it's not around anymore. It's useless. And the instructor turned out that we came with me. We designed our own system. It was actually, as archaic and as old as it was, it actually had features in it that a lot of major firms did not have till 25 years later. And I actually did the programming and the design. And the funny story is, as an aside, it turned out that the person who helped me, turned out he had two job offers. One was from me, and the other some firm that was cataloging websites called Yahoo. He could have been number 10 at Yahoo.
Oh, wow.
It came over to me instead.
But he's better
And
off working with you.
yeah, not a great decision. And then eventually we saw the wisdom of being web-based, and we were the first background firm to adopt ClearStar completely. I mean, just put our entire business on ClearStar. And that worked out. That took us a long ways for a long time as well.
So you created a verification workflow.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting, and this really goes back, is that verifications at the time, and probably still is, was everyone's sort of Achilles heel. And I would just sit there doing time motion studies. I would watch verifiers work with kind of like a stopwatch sort of thing. And they would make a call. They'd look through their workflow, then pick up the phone, then make a call. And whatever happened, they would then make a note, then put the file down, and then get up, use the bathroom, and then maybe make a second call, and maybe they would get a completion. I said, there's got to be a better way. Mm-hmm. And this is back in, this was Craig Goodell was the manager of this. And I used his company he was working with to do the first programming. We called it Reference Pro. And we outlined, okay, everything that software can do for referencing and everything that a human being has to do. And how can we automate everything but the human being? And that we formed Reference Pro, that we did, all sorts of stuff that is still pretty advanced. And we did it, that was, when, software was a little archaic. I mean, you didn't, you needed a physical switch at the time. Now you can use software switches. And so we didn't quite, it was a little, probably before its time, we didn't really have all the software tools we needed. But we basically did a decision tree where we figured out that when that call is made, every result that could happen, and accounted for it. And so the verifiers didn't have to think. And the idea was, I'm not sure we ever quite got there, but the idea was kind of the verifiers were just, constantly being fed the next thing up by the phone, and then the system would know what to do with things, and when to call again, when to batch it, because you might have 3 calls with the same employer, or what time zone they were in. Every employer had their own rules. And at one time, we did the verification calls for, 100 plus other background firms, and they all had their rules, and each of their clients also had their own rules. We had thousands of rules to follow, and our software was able to, for the most part, sort that out. But that was kind of interesting. I finally decided I didn't want to be both a wholesaler and a retailer, so I stayed with Employment Screening Resource ESR, and we sold off Reference Pro. I mean, so it was interesting to try to, early on, to try to figure out a workflow where we can automate it and take out the human factor, as much as possible.
Yeah, that's great. So, writer, trainer, compliance is a passion, and you're a technology innovator as well. So you got a crash course on just about everything as a new business owner.
Yeah, and of course, the problem is I made so many mistakes. Some of the mistakes I liked so much, I did it a couple times. But when you're early in your my entrepreneurial career, I just we went after too much stuff. There was too many shiny things here or there, and those were the days where every client wanted their own customization. If the button wasn't orange, then your software was no good. Well,
right.
It didn't matter, but to them, they were used to orange buttons. So we very early on, did e-signatures. Other firms did it, independently developed it, but we did it way before a lot of firms, and because we figured out that process. We did, back in 2001, I had a website called My Job History, where people could self-verify, and everyone had a unique number, and we had all sorts of whistles and bells where we can, verify different resumes, and employers would log in, and you could choose which employer would see which cover letter, and you could have a seal of approval. And we had a whole back office where we would work with job engines, and they could refer us clients, and they would be premium clients, and they would get so it was just this. We designed this Cadillac, and again, we were a little before our time, and it turned out that when we did our focus groups, people loved the idea, but we didn't ask the right question. Would you love the idea at X price? Well,
There you go.
that was the real question, and we didn't ask that succinctly enough, and it turned out there wasn't. As a free service, people loved it. As a paid service, not so much. So, but we did that as well, and a couple other firms that pre-employee had done something like that. So it was Bob Mather had done something similar as well. So, something we played around with in the early days.
Gotcha.
And it was kind of interesting.
And of course, you weren't busy enough, innovating and running a company. You decided to write the Safe Hiring Manual back in 2004. I think it was the first published version, which we all call the Bible, the background screening Bible. And so what were you passionate about there to say, hey, I got to put all this in writing. I want to share it with my colleagues, share it with, with HR, whatever. I mean, talk to me about that.
Well, it just seemed like there was a vacuum. Like we're, a large business, a large, economic sector, a large industry, and there was really very little written on it. And I had, all this knowledge, from the ground up on all these different areas. And I said, why not, create something for employers? And maybe it's a marketing tool, who knows? And, just started to write. And the interesting thing about that, Mike Sankey was willing to be the publisher and the editor. And I don't think people realize this about Mike, but he was a fantastic, among all his other skills, he was a phenomenal editor and took all this raw material and helped me organize it and would send it back. And it said, well, let's redo this, redo that. Because eventually the hard part of writing a book is not spewing out 1,000 pages. And that part was relatively easy. The hard part was the editing and the organization. Because you have to edit every single sentence, every single paragraph. You have to fact check. You have to source it. You have to index it. That was the hard part, and Mike was really instrumental in working on that part as well. So I just thought that it would be just interesting to do, basically, just to take all this and put it out, and then to think about things that people really haven't thought about. And I wrote one chapter on identity, 30 or 40 pages, on what's identity, and then. As an industry, we say, well, we're going to fight fake identity. And I said, well, how do you create a fake ID? And so I ordered all these books on how to create a fake identity and how to disappear and do this and that. I was saying, I hope my wife doesn't see this, so she'll be wondering what I'm up to. And so we went down a number of these rabbit holes, just interesting stuff. And so we wrote about really every aspect of the screening industry, and we did a couple updates, which were substantial rewrites. And the last one was 2017, so it does need an update. What's in there is pretty good, but it's just not up to date. But it was just it was so interesting to take all this information and data that I had or understood or had in my brain, and to put it out in a way that was organized and methodical and was broken down so it was useful. And that make sure everything was fact checked, and Kirsten Bagas was really helpful in the international section. I always went to Kirsten to make sure anytime I wrote anything about international, I always ran it by her to make sure I wasn't seeing anything that she would be mad at me later. So it was just just a really fascinating thing to do, and so it was just a lot of fun too. It was just basically, I think I must have a little dose of attention deficit disorder, because I said, I need something to do, so I'll write a book.
There you go. You didn't have enough to do. Well, it's a great reference guide. We all use it, and we admire you for writing it, and thank you for providing that resource for us.
I'm glad it's helpful. And every time I look at it, I go, oh, I should have written this, or I should have added that. So for the next edition, I would change it, and we kept playing with it. And even now, I have tons of notes on things I need to add or clarify if I ever did a next edition. So, who knows at this point.
There you go. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about NEPBS, National Association of Professional Background Screeners. We know that you were one of the founders. You're our first co-chair. They really got us off the ground. And you've been a member. You and I have both been members for life. Or at least since it started. So what's your proudest moment?
My personal proudest moment is just getting the thing off the ground. And someone, every organization, in order to make that leap from wouldn't it be nice to an actual entity that can then start to learn and grow and develop as it has, You just need somebody to just jump in and just do it. The Nike model, just do it. And so that was kind of interesting and fun, that I was able to just make it happen and then get it into the hands of the right people who then took it and just blew it up into the wonderful thing it is today. It's all the board members and the committee members and the IMI and Melissa and the professional staff. So yeah, just having that role of basically being able to supply the initial spark and get that punch list punched, where it ended up we actually had an association.
Yeah. And of course you received the Mike Sankey Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah, that was very nice.
After Mike. You were the first recipient after Mike.
After Mike, yeah. No, that was very nice. I appreciated that, and it was very nice of the association to award that. So
yeah, it must have been a very proud moment.
Yeah.
I remember you were very proud, and we had a little fun poking fun at you, and
especially that Bob Capel guy who was one of the speakers had a little bit of fun poking at me. But
you know me, I like to try to have a little fun.
Well, it wouldn't be fun without that. So.
Exactly. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about life beyond screening, beyond the legal work you've done, being an attorney, background screening, company that you grew, your time at PBS. What do you do outside of all of that? What do you love to do?
Well, gosh, there's just so much. I spent a lot of time with my family, of course. I always had a rule, even in the early days of any PBS and ESR, I was always home for dinner, and I was always around for weekends. So it was always family first. Now, maybe after dinner, I'd work for 4 or 5 hours, but I was always home for dinner. And after that, some of the fun things is my younger days before I had hearing issues, I was an avid traveler and scuba diver. When I took my year off in '96, one of my goals was to dive in all of the best dive locations on the planet. And I was on that track to do it. Yeah. And unfortunately, that year, my ear went, but I got pretty far. I drove all over the Caribbean, the Red Sea, and the Pacific, lots of the Pacific, and Hawaii. So I've dove all over. So that was, so diving was something I used to do, and that was always fun. And I got really involved in hiking and mountaineering. So I done a lot of hiking and camping out, backpacking in Yosemite and the Sierras, which is not that far from my house, and climbed Mount Whitney once, the highest mountain in the lower 48. And that was part of a 2.5-week Sierra backpack, and that was a lot of fun. And went up the cable route twice on Yosemite, and I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's not.
I've seen it. Never done it.
On Half Dome. It's not the Half Dome where it's a sheer, 512. Its cable is pretty sheer. It doesn't look possible, actually. It looks like it's against the law of gravity, but a lot of people can do it because they have the cables. And I've done that twice. That was kind of fun. And basically traveling. I've traveled, close to 100 countries or over 100, I don't know, and been to, lots of really interesting places. Of course, there's more places to go. You tend to, I love the places I've been, but I always think, but I haven't been there, and, I'm not sure I'll make all those places at this point. So, going to baseball stadiums and going around the country and just traveling and having a good time trying to do things.
So what is the most interesting historical place that you've ever visited overseas?
Overseas?
Yeah, overseas.
Yeah, probably, well, I've gone up and down Israel and, all in Jerusalem and probably Jerusalem or Petra, the Treasury building at Petra, the Indiana Jones building.
Yeah.
But I think probably Israel, all the archaeological sites and the historical sites in Israel is probably the most interesting from a historical viewpoint. And also I'm an English history buff, so I've seen lots of places in England that have historical significance, and Europe and so forth. So that's all been fun.
And what's the most beautiful place you've been to?
Well, Italy is a place I would always go to. So
what part of Italy?
The Amalfi Coast or the Cinque Terre, one of the two. I've spent a lot of time and made a number of trips to the Amalfi Coast and hiking and swimming and whatever. Right?
That's beautiful.
There. Yeah.
So what place haven't you been to that you really want to go to? What's on your bucket list? Let's put it that way.
Well, I don't know.
3 places on your bucket list.
Yeah, well, Australia and New Zealand and Fiji are the 3 places. Okay. And at this point, not sure I'll be able to make those. So, right. Technically, I've had a medical condition since I was 19 where technically I shouldn't really be more than 2 hours from a hospital. And of course, I have spent lots and lots of time being days and days from hospitals, and really all over the Caribbean and on safari in Africa and in places where you couldn't possibly get to a hospital within 2 or 3 days. And under certain circumstances, I need to be there within an hour or so. So I think as I'm getting older, it's like I'm thinking, well, I think I've pressed my luck enough here. I think I've been everywhere where I shouldn't be. Theoretically, I probably shouldn't leave my house. Right? So I've kind of given that up and decided, okay, I'm not going to tempt fate that much more at this point in my life.
There you go. And you love to hike. You and I have been hiking together.
Yeah,
so
hiking.
Where do you like to hike?
Yeah, actually near me in Marin County, we have a little 2,500-foot hill and a whole nature area. So there's a ton of hiking there. And that's my weekend hiking. And then we live near all the wineries. So if my wife and I have nothing to do, we belong to a whole bunch of wineries, and we'll go up to. I don't drink, but she.
I was going to say you don't drink, but
I don't drink, but I drive. So I'm a member.
Yeah,
So I'm the driver. She's and she's the taster. So it works out. That works out really well. All right.
Yeah, you do have some great wineries up there, and thank you for.
Yeah, we've taken you up there, and
thank you for being a host. Wonderful.
Yeah, and you actually like the brewery better than the winery, so that.
Well,
out.
I don't discriminate. Wine, beer, whatever. You've got the best of both worlds up your way.
Yeah.
So let's talk about sports. You and I have been to a few sporting events, some ball games. I know you love baseball. I know you love to go to the different baseball parks. So what are your top 3 baseball parks? What are your most favorite?
Oh, well, the one I liked the best was the one you and I have been to a couple of times was, what's it called? That was Three Rivers?
PNC Park?
Yeah, PNC Park. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So
Pittsburgh,
PNC Park is one of my favorites. And of course, there's the place in my heart for Dodger Stadium where I basically grew up.
Sure.
Right. And then after that, I guess AT&T where the Giants play are my 3 favorite.
What about Wrigley?
Oh, well, Wrigley's classic, but it's not. I've made the journey to all the parks, and actually last week I went to Sacramento because the A's are now playing at a minor league park in Sacramento, so I had to go and see that. So I'm trying to keep up. Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Besides baseball, what other sports do you follow?
Well, when the Warriors are in the championship, I'll follow the Warriors. Right. That's right. Yeah. When the 49ers are in the championship, I'll follow the 49ers. Right. And every year I follow UCLA football until they start losing.
Right.
And sometimes it's sooner than later. So I'm still living the dream that someday UCLA will win a national championship. But I'm not so sure about that. Right.
Well, we'll see if UCLA gets through Penn State this October. I know we're going to that game.
We
a
are.
lot of fun. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I enjoy going to sporting events with you. We have a good time, for sure. So let's talk about something we haven't talked about, and it's a passion of yours. A lot of people don't know that you are a magician.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
That is true.
So So help me understand. How do you become a magician? How do you get trained? Is there a certification? Is there a test? Is there other magicians that say, hey, yeah, you're really good, or hey, you should give this up? I mean, talk to me about that.
Well, really odd. I mean, I was in law school, and a buddy of mine showed me a magic trick, and I was just fascinated by it. He finally showed me how he did it, and I said, that's really interesting. And so I did with magic what I did with background screening. I just consumed myself with it, going to law school at the time, but I still had plenty of time, and I just learned all about magic and cards and coins and stage magic and big illusions and small illusions, and started practicing and learning and understanding the moves. And it was so funny. Yesterday, I just finally gave away about 15 boxes of old magic books I had to a magician magic shop owner so they could go on to their next life. And I still have my own personal libraries here. So, yeah, I haven't performed for a while, but yeah, I'm a member of the Magic Castle, and if you're not familiar with that, it's a kind of a real special magicians club in the Hollywood Hills on Franklin Street. And I became a member of that, I think, in the Stone Age, 1977 or 78. And you had an audition in front of world-class magicians, and I put together a basic little show. And I actually managed to fool them. I did a trick or two and said, I didn't see that. And so I've never performed there. I was never, the performer, you have to be a super full-time professional.
Gotcha.
But it's just been just a passion, and I love watching it. And I actually, as a magician, I love being fooled. If someone can actually pull one on me, it's like, wow, that's great. And, I know what to look for and, most of the moves. So there isn't much that I don't know how it's done. But it's not knowing how it's done. That's not the challenge. It's kind of the enjoying the illusion, enjoying the wonderment of the magic and just seeing something happen that violates the laws of nature. That is just so wonderful. Even if I know how it's done, I still just enjoy seeing people do it. I mean, I still ooh and ah.
Have you been to Las Vegas and seen any of the shows there?
Oh yeah, no, I've seen a ton of the shows in Las Vegas, and those, they just blow me away. Those are so fun, and I just really enjoy them. And I don't know how all the tricks are done. I mean, I could find out if some, but I don't care. I just enjoy being fooled and seeing how the magic is done. So it's just really tremendous.
Yeah, just so the audience knows, so I participated in a couple of Les's magic tricks where, he cuts your tie in half, and then of course, he puts it back together magically. Mm-hmm. And of course, I've got a bunch of, cut up ties in my closet. You could never pull that one off. So maybe you need a little more work there.
That's right. Yeah, I haven't done that one lately. I've run out of ties for that one. All right.
So who's your favorite magician?
And actually, I don't have one favorite. My category of magicians it's a type of magic called close-up, where it's cards and coins done right under your nose. Or sometimes it's bar magic, where someone, is at a bar and they do it. So that to me is pure magic, where it's just, you're not depending upon, some sort of magical effect or a magic box or, some illusion or delusion. It's just you, your hands, your patter, and the audience. And it's just in its purest form. So I really enjoy watching that.
Yeah, it's fun. I enjoy magic, watching really interesting and very hard tricks. It's very cool. So what are you doing today? I know you've done some expert witness work. You've done that, I think, when you owned ESR and a little bit after that. I know you're very passionate about that and staying involved in the industry. But what are you doing today?
Well, so I'm still playing around with writing some articles. I'm just getting ready to publish an article that's been on my mind for a while on going back to my criminal law days, when people would ask you, oh, how can you defend guilty people? And so I have an article coming out shortly explaining, how the system works and the importance of criminal defense attorneys and why we have to defend everyone, no matter how guilty other people might think they are. And so I have some articles coming out. Like most people, I'm following AI, so I use AI a lot. Given my proximity to Silicon Valley, I have the ability to go and to various events and watch AI pitches. So I see a fair amount of pitches where people are pitching these fantastic ideas for AI. And, as a business owner, I have a different perspective whether it actually work or not.
Sure.
But it's just the inventiveness of seeing what people are doing with AI these days and watching founders who are just so excited about their new business. And, maybe I'll invest in them if I find one I really like and might be looking to invest in one at some point. I have my commercial real estate work to do. So kind of a hodgepodge of things that, going through old books and old papers as well and cleaning things up. And then the podcast has been kind of fun. It's been a real fun opportunity to talk to people that, and people I've known for a long time, but I still find out things about them I didn't know, or people I kind of knew, or people I don't know at all. Yeah. But based upon what they've done in the industry, they just look like really interesting. Yeah. And so I've talked to just so many different people on every single podcast. I've just been blown away by what people are doing and histories and stories and their take on things. It's just been so much fun to listen to people and talk to people and hear what people have to say.
I mean, you've created such a fun and great resource. I mean, it's really fun to get to know some of these folks. And you and I, we know a lot of the same people in the industry, but to understand their backstories and their education and their background, right, and how they got involved in the industry, what they're passionate about and what they do on their off time, it's just great. It's really great to know those folks. No, you've done a great job in in putting this podcast together. So thanks for doing that.
No, it's been a pleasure. And I think next year we'll probably, instead of one a week, which has been a little more grueling than I had bargained for, we might go to one or two a month. But there's still, some people out there I like to talk to. So I might keep it going next year for just at a reduced level. But it's just been a ton of fun and really interesting.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun and very educational. So any words of wisdom for someone that's getting into the background screening industry? Anything that you've learned along the way or any challenges that you see for them? I mean, it's got to be tough. It's a very different time in getting into the industry. You and I got in the very early 1990s.
Yeah.
And today it's a very different landscape.
Yeah, and people say it's a mature industry, but I'm not so sure. I mean, we look back at when we started to where we are today, and people who get into today, and fast forward 20 years or so with AI and blockchain and who else, it may be that today is the good old days, and that with the change in technology, maybe who knows what the future will hold. So I think that it's a great industry. I really like the people. And that's really probably the reason I stayed in it, because I enjoy not only the challenge of so many moving parts in the compliance, but it's just been such great people. And I look at all the people who've done all the work for PBSA and just blown this thing out of the water to the point where it's just such a fantastic thing. And so it's just the people involved are just great. So my only advice is to I've observed through my career that it doesn't take that much to find something that needs to get done and just do it. And then, for example, the early days of any PBS is just you step in and you just do it.
Right.
And, one of the things I hate the most is when people spend more time talking about a problem than it would take to solve it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't believe in the theory either that you just destroy it first and see what happens. I mean, you gotta, you don't want to be a bull in a china shop. You want to, be aware of secondary consequences and unintended consequences and so forth. But my advice is that if you're in this industry, just, go for it and put your head down like a Big Ten lineman and just charge forward, learn everything you can learn. Don't be afraid to step up. Try to make yourself indispensable by learning and being valuable and just doing more. Because it's almost like the Olympics. I mean, the difference between a gold medal winner and fourth place is a fraction of a second, right? I mean, just a little bit more effort. And you can really see that throughout the entire the industry. So basically, just put yourself out there. And I'll say the same thing a lot of my guests have said. If you want to make yourself a thought leader and find ways to advance your career, just go to PBSA and just go to town. Whatever it is, whatever part you pick, whatever committee you pick, just be willing to put in a little bit of work and show some leadership and get along with people and put yourself out there. The great thing about PBSA is that it's such a meritocracy that there's nothing to hold you back. Anyone can end up being chair of PBSA or being on the board. If you decide that you want to do that and you put in the work and you show that spark of being willing to do it. And that would be my advice for newcomers.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of your guests have talked about that. And we talk about the importance of being a volunteer, getting involved in PBSA. It's great education. Get involved, learn something new, meet someone that you've never met before. The doors will open, opportunities will be in front of you. It offers so much more opportunity. And if you don't get involved, I don't know how someone new in the industry can survive.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Or thrive. I mean, if all you want to do is just have a paycheck and work 9 to 5 and that's it, then fine. Anyone could choose that.
Sure.
But if you want to choose to be outstanding or exceptional, you need to get involved in the industry and really make your mark, contribute.
Yeah.
So,
definitely. Any last word or any topic that we didn't talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I get asked a lot about, and I'll bring it up under the last word, is people mention, well, God, you went from prosecution to defense, and then defense to background screening, right? So, and I'll answer that because people do ask me about that, and part of the reason I went from prosecution to defense is when you're a prosecutor, you don't realize how much power and resource you have. And I just ended up thinking, maybe I'll put my talents to use on behalf of defendants who, you don't have resources. You don't have help. You don't have investigators. You don't have the police behind you. You start off with juries who assume you're guilty because why would you be charged? And it would just seem more challenging. And, I think part of what was so interesting about being a defense lawyer and how it relates to screening is that, I handled grisly cases and complex cases and horrible cases involving, child abuse and, sex crimes and homicides and robberies and, stuff that make your hair curl. So I won't bother you with that. But a lot of the time, when you're a defense attorney, part of your steady diet is a group that, when I was a DA, I had a supervisor who said, those are the can't copes, that they can't cope. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if you have the, misdemeanor calendar especially, but sometimes the felony calendar as well, you have people, just keep in mind that you have people that aren't bad or evil. They're just people that just can't quite cope with society. Somehow they just don't understand thou shalt not steal. It hasn't sunk in yet, or thou shalt not do this or that.
Right.
And it's not that I'm excusing what they did, but you just want to be fair with these folks. And, you don't want to throw the book at everybody. And, I thought was pretty enlightened. And as a defense attorney, I got to know up front and personal, I don't know, thousands, but hundreds and hundreds of defendants and their families and their stories and how they ended up where they ended up. And it's not to say they weren't guilty or they weren't guilty of something. I've had, my share of innocent clients. I've had my Perry Mason moments. I've had, my particular expertise was cross-examination. And I've had cases where on the stand I was able to get people to admit that they were lying or break out as a prosecution. That my specialty was breaking alibis, fake alibis. And I remember I had one case where I had an expert from the FBI testify that a particular bullet only could have come from one gun, and I was able to, cross-examine that FBI expert to the point where it was obviously not true, that they knew what outcome the DA wanted, and they were predestined their testimony to fit that, where in fact that bullet could have come from a number of guns. So cross-examination to me was the most fun. But, part of being a defense attorney is that you really get to know these individuals who are charged with crime and their lives and their stories and their problems. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that when you had somebody who was facing the potential of probation, in criminal law, unless it's a mandatory state prison felony, which is, robbery, murder, things like that, you usually, the judge first decides prison or probation or jail, that sort of thing. And what always struck me as the most important factor in sentencing when I was a criminal defense attorney was employment, whether the person had a job or not. Mm-hmm. And if a person had a job, that was probably, assuming the person otherwise showed contrition and some insight into what they did, and you had a plan as why they wouldn't do it again. And of course, if it was an addiction case, then if you were able to get them into a program, and those beds were scarce, but that was one way to keep a person out of prison. But normally, a person needed a job. Mm-hmm. And that's where I became introduced to the idea, and I spent how important employment is for people. And I think one of the things, and here I'll be on my soapbox for a minute or two, I think that the last chance movement may not understand, because a lot of those folks have a theoretical understanding of people with criminal records, and my understanding is up front and personal, having spent so many hundreds and thousands of hours with these folks, oftentimes in jails, and is that where the person really needs the second chance is before sentencing, not after they got out of jail. Right. Because if you have a person who has a job and an employer who vouches for them, that's probably the most important factor I've seen when it comes to criminal sentencing. And so that had taught me, all my experiences taught me, you have to background screen, but there's just nothing like substitutes for having a job in the criminal justice system. And so that's why I've always been a big advocate of the second chance movement. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that the industry as a whole really recognizes and understand how important it is for us to do our job right and be accurate and educate employers on the proper use of criminal records and the fair use, and why fair chance hiring is so vital to society, that we're just not automatically using a criminal record as an early knockout punch without giving a person a chance.
Sure.
So my experience, I think, as a criminal lawyer, has really given me kind of an even-handed view of the industry. I mean, on the one hand, I've seen like the case I described where a person was almost killed an elderly woman where they shouldn't have been there. And on the other hand, I've seen, the need, a lot of these people that may have criminal records, that they really do need that second chance. And so that's been a real eye-opener for me, and something that I may have a unique perspective on, having, worked with offenders so closely for, 10 years, and knowing them and their story and their families and their situations. And that's why I've always preached the idea that accuracy is so important. We're not just producing things on an assembly line. We're not just data machines. We're not data vending machines, quarter in and data out. I mean, there's real live people. And a lot of these people I knew and liked. I didn't like what they did necessarily, but and particularly those that I put in the can't cope category, who weren't not evil people, but somehow they got involved or whatever, however they went down that road. So that's kind of my soapbox in terms of the need for the industry to really commit to this idea of a second chance, and the idea of individualized assessment and how we should embrace that and make sure, because I don't think that even the government, even the EEOC understands that the background screening industry as an industry is the most direct line of communication to decision makers, because every employer has a background firm they talk to, and we're the ones that are in the best position to help employers understand the importance of the second chance hiring, fair chance hiring. So that's been probably my last word, and I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's great advice, great insight. You're very passionate about second chance movement. I know that, and I know it'll continue on, and I know you'll continue to be passionate about it. Les, I just wanted to say thank you so much for letting me be the host today, and thank you for producing Behind the Screens. We all enjoy it. It's great education. It's great to get to know our colleagues. So thank you for having me on today, and thank you for being on the other side of the mic. It's been a great pleasure.
Brother Bob, thank you. It's been a pleasure sitting in the hot seat. Thank you very much.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Thanks. All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info, or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.